what's going on, guys? For people that have been around in the Souls community for a long time, know that there is one thing that has persisted ever since the very first game, and that is the conversation around difficulty and accessibility in the Souls games. And it's a topic that we've covered numerous times here on the channel, but there's something different about the article that we're going to cover today. Because I saw the headline of this article and I thought it was just going to be another basic one about an easy mode, but I believe it opens up a lot of interesting questions that we in the Souls community do need to ask ourselves. But what really got me was a take from another game developer about this article that quite literally blew my mind, and not in a good way. So we're gonna break all this down today and try to figure out if the Souls games are not accessible enough and need difficulty options. But as we get into all that today, you guys know I'm chasing down 100k subs here on the channel, so if you're new around here, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. We cover all things Elden Ring and FromSoftware, and during the wait for Elden Ring DLC, there's a lot going on that you're not going to want to miss. But with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this article. The piece in question that we're going to be taking a look at today is Elden Ring and Souls games should have difficulty options. The time has come for the Souls franchise to become more accessible. And this is from DualShockers. Now, normally when I cover these types of articles, I tend to just roast them out the gate, but the discussion around accessibility specifically has grown a lot recently. So I want to take this at its merits and see if we can be convinced. So let's go ahead and get into it. Money unsurely spent. When I consider buying games, in this case Elden Ring and Dark Souls, many factors go into my decision. I look at what reviewers are saying and I try to gauge the game's levels of accessibility. For those who might not know, I was born with one arm, so when it comes to purchasing games, I need to know if I can play them first. While I'm not against learning opponents' strategies and movements, I am against being unable to choose my adventure's difficulty, especially when it comes to my first playthrough. So right off the bat, one thing I do want to commend about this article is that it is actually written by somebody with a disability. A lot of times when we get these articles about difficulty, they're written by people who aren't disabled on behalf of others who might be, and it makes it overall very disingenuous. But having one arm is very much something that's going to inhibit your ability to play games. My first question though would be, why is difficulty the automatic solution? This sounds like an issue with personal movement and functionality. So to me, the solution that I see would be a controller that you can use with one hand. Now, granted, I'm not a disabled person, but I think the exact problem is something they should address. Why is the logic not to supplement that lack of movement? I'm not sure I totally see the connection with difficulty here, but that's just my initial thoughts. Let's go ahead and keep reading. Depending on the type of game, I normally play on medium at first. On medium difficulty, games present a nice amount of challenge for me. I do not feel my progress as being badly hindered, and I do not feel like I threw my $70 away. But when I play a game like Elden Ring or Dark Souls, I can't help but feel defeated. Not just in the sense of losing a fight, but as if the series is not made for me. There's a real sense of feeling left out. And I mean this in the most respectful way possible, but they're absolutely correct. The series wasn't made for them. Not to be insensitive here, but the game was made for people with two arms, which is likely 99.9% of their base. But let's go ahead and be totally honest here. These games are not that hard. Elden Ring offers a numerous amount of ways to make the game easier, aside from a standard difficulty slider. As soon as you get to the first area, you can summon another player to help you on your journey, which dramatically decreases the difficulty of the game. There already are difficulty options in this game. Heck, I just saw an article yesterday of somebody who made a spirit summon that can solo all the bosses. Not to mention you can go and farm runes and get over leveled with no limit. So anytime I see this conversation come up and they don't mention those things, you automatically know they don't actually mean it. And even recently, there's been a spur of people doing challenge runs on Elden Ring, setting up control schemes that utilize other parts of the body like the feet, the mouth, even using their voice to control their character, and all of them beat the game. So once again, I mean this in the most respectful and sensitive way, but if you have a physical disability that limits you from grasping the controller, I would look into alternative controlling methods, and not expect the game to change for you. And not to mention that overcoming that physical limitation with a new control style would allow you to play every game better, not just Elden Ring. But let's keep reading. I am playing a game by myself, and how I choose to play does not make another person's achievements on a harder difficulty any lesser. It does not hinder the developer's vision because many others are playing on hard mode. There will always be those who welcome an immediate challenge. I am someone who prefers to build up to challenge. I have not played Cuphead in months because I get frustrated to the point where I do not want to play anymore. Now this right here is the standard easy mode argument that we've heard numerous times before, and every time it's brought up we know that it does not hold water. And the main reason for that is that the initial statement they put in that paragraph is immediately untrue, so people are never going to be happy. But the main thing that this argument doesn't address when it comes to the Souls games is that the main selling point of these games is satisfaction through overcoming challenge. And one of the primary factors that creates that satisfaction is value through scarcity, and the only way that works is if the challenge has a standard. And since everybody is different, it's up to you to figure out how you can overcome that challenge. And that's the way it's always been with these games. That's why they're RPGs. That's why the story is so abstract, is because it's not the primary reason you play these games. Overall, I think it's really disingenuous and honestly extremely unfair to reduce a game's entire accessibility to simply a difficulty slider. But in order to understand this idea further, I want to show you guys a response to this article by another game developer. In a comment to the tweet that posted this article, somebody said, "Accessibility options absolutely, things like colorblind options, one-handed modes, audio cues and such are great. Difficulty options are unnecessary for these games for so many reasons, not least of which is that the games make their own difficulty, especially Elden Ring." And I absolutely agree with that. But then we see a response from Ian Hamilton here who says, "Everything you listed is a difficulty option. That's literally why they exist." Now, I didn't understand that at first, and I'll explain why in a minute, but look at the continuation of this thread. To that tweet, somebody else responded, "No, those only alter how you interact with the game. Difficulty options are much more often how much damage an enemy does, how much you deal, and how much can it take. Audio cues and color correction don't change how much everything punches for." Which again, I tend to agree with, and I think most people would, because when we think of difficulty sliders, that's typically what they change. Things like how much damage enemies deal, how much HP they have, and how fast they are. I would say the vast majority of the time when you change the difficulty of the game, that's what gets altered. But y'all gotta see this. This guy explains that he's a longtime accessibility developer, working on games like The Last of Us 2 and on the Xbox Adaptive Controller. And if you go to his page, the pinned tweet is a definition of difficulty that quite honestly blew my mind. Difficulty equals capability versus barrier. Disability equals mismatched interaction between capability and barrier. Accessibility equals avoiding unnecessary mismatch between capability and barrier. Now, I want to think about this for a minute. According to this equation, it implies that any one player's subjective capability determines the difficulty of the game. So effectively basing the accessibility and difficulty arguments not on the vast majority of players that are going to be playing a game, but on the outliers in capability, which personally, in the most respectful way, I find to be ridiculous. I simply don't understand how that can be the paradigm for accessibility in the gaming industry when we're talking about video games. I mean, unless I'm missing something major here, by that standard it sounds impossible to make a game accessible. Now, where I think the confusion between these arguments is coming from is that the traditional idea of difficulty places that difficulty on the character within the game, therefore altering factors that would affect your character, while the developer here is seeing difficulty as the barriers that affect the player, which I don't believe is possible to address within the game, because there is always going to be somebody less capable, so how far are we going to take it? And I'll give you an example of what I mean. This developer says he worked on The Last of Us 2. One of the accessibility options in The Last of Us 2 was that players had the option to completely skip puzzles. You would literally remove portions of the game as an accessibility option. So are we going to apply that same logic to the Souls games? Are we going to give players the option to skip bosses? Because when this conversation comes up, bosses are the most inaccessible part of the Souls games, according to these journalists and developers. Now, I don't want to sit here and be an alarmist. I do think there's a conversation to be had, but I want to leave my conclusion with this thought. Does a game have to be for everybody? Part of that equation was capability versus barrier. So at what point do we stop tearing down the barriers and instead focus on building up the capability? I'll leave that up to you guys in the comments. But anyways though, that's gonna pretty much do it for the video today. I just wanted to have this discussion because the Souls games are always kind of the ones that get kicked by these journalists and developers as being inaccessible, when time and time again they're the highest rated games that people absolutely love. But if you were to read some of these articles and comments by these developers, you'd think they're nothing more than exclusive and oppressive, and I just don't think that's fair. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe if you're new around here. The 1-year anniversary of Elden Ring is just around the corner, and I think there might be something big that happens on that day. So I will see you in the next one.